Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I live in an older apartment complex that I moved into during the pandemic. Got really lucky with the rent. It's way below market rate for this area. Even though the building is older, most units sell for over $1 million these days. It's an interesting mix of residents. Older folks who bought when it was cheap, wealthy newcomers, and middle-class renters like me. One of the quirks of living here is that you need to take two separate elevator rides to get from the street to your apartment, one to the security desk and another to your floor. During the pandemic, management implemented a one household per elevator rule since the elevators are too small for social distancing. They even modified the elevators so they won't stop if someone's already inside, preventing people from trying to squeeze in. Because of this change, pressing the up or down button doesn't matter anymore. It just calls an elevator, and you can go wherever you want. Management sent an email about this to all residents. So there I was, returning from walking my dog while wearing my expensive headphones, a $400 pair I'd saved up for months to buy and use daily for work. At the first set of elevators, I saw an older couple and this woman waiting. She was decked out in pearls, diamond earrings, a massive wedding ring, and designer clothes. Typical wealthy resident type who probably had some high-powered executive husband while she worked as a marketing manager or something. I noticed only the up button was pressed, so I hit the down button to call another elevator, then went back to my spot in line. I figured once their elevator left, I could press up again and save time for everyone, including the two other dog walkers who had joined the line behind me. The older couple got their elevator, and when the second one arrived, the woman started waving at me to take it. I pulled off my headphones. I politely told her I was fine waiting since she was there first. She insisted the elevator was going down and therefore meant for me. I tried explaining about calling another elevator, but she cut me off, yelling at me to get in since there was a line. She was being really rude and clearly didn't understand how the elevators work now, even though it had been this way for a year. I decided it wasn't worth explaining, put my headphones back on, and got in. I pressed floor 1 for the security desk. As the doors were closing, she must have pressed the up button because they opened again. I hit the door close button and heard her shriek through my music. She then sprinted into the elevator and saw I was going up. She started screaming about how I had lied and skipped her place in line, demanding that I get out of what she claimed was her elevator. She held her hand over the door sensor to keep them open. I tried explaining that I had offered to wait, but she had insisted I go, but she wouldn't listen. She must have thought I was turning up my music to ignore her because she suddenly started grabbing at my headphones and hitting me in the face. She was screaming at me to take off my headphones, calling me a liar, and demanding I get out of what she kept calling her elevator. My 40-pound cattle dog might be deaf, but he's not stupid. He started barking and growling fiercely, making her jump back with my headphones in her hands. When I was pulling him out of the elevator, she ran forward and kicked him hard in the stomach. Then she threw my headphones down, stomped on them, kicked them out of the elevator, and took her ride up. I was in shock, my dog was hurt, and the other people in line were horrified. One of them must have told security because a guard came down within minutes. The police were called, security footage was pulled, and they identified the woman who was asked to wait upstairs. After giving my statement, we went up to security where the woman was waiting with her husband. Sure enough, he looked like some upper management tech guy in his button-up shirt tucked into expensive jeans. I quickly took my dog to my apartment and came back. Her husband asked about the headphones cost, and when I mentioned they were $400, he immediately handed me the cash. I took it, and she looked smug, probably used to money solving her problems. But she seemed to forget about assaulting me and kicking my dog. When the police asked if I wanted to press charges, I said yes. She completely lost it, shrieking and hurling insults while her husband tried to drag her away from the police and me. When she started making threats about hurting my dog, the police had to tase her to get her under control. They charged her with assault, animal cruelty, assault on a police officer, resisting arrest, and public intoxication. She got evicted from the building the next week, and I heard she's facing serious jail time, all because she couldn't wait an extra 3 minutes for an elevator. When I used to work at Burger King 2 years ago, there was this one woman who made my life absolutely miserable. She couldn't stand that I was younger and better at the job than her. Whenever she knew I was working after her shift, she would deliberately mess up our drive-through times, which we had to keep under 3 minutes. She'd get them up to around 13 minutes, and I'd spend my entire shift trying to fix them while doing my other tasks. It sounds simple enough, but we never got enough cars during my shift to bring the average back down. Things got worse when I dislocated my shoulder at work and had to take 2 weeks off. She got my hours while I was gone, and when I came back, I was still under doctor's orders not to lift more than 5 pounds. Everyone else was helpful and understanding about my injury, except her. She was furious that I took my hours back and still managed to work harder than her despite being injured. That's when she started spreading lies about me. She even hired someone to keep tabs on me outside of work. I wore my shoulder sling whenever I wasn't at work or home to prevent people from accidentally bumping into me and causing pain. One of the managers took her side, and together they made my work life absolute hell. I eventually quit once my workers' compensation was finished and I was healed. I tried my best to forget about all of it until today. I was standing in line at the pharmacy to pick up medications I've been prescribed at the emergency room. I was still wearing my hospital bracelets, making it obvious where I'd just come from. This woman was standing in the aisle since all the seats were taken. At first, I didn't recognize her. She looked completely different from when I last saw her, when she had no front teeth and ankle-length hair. She sneered at me, saying she knew I was pretending not to recognize her. I told her I didn't know who she was and turned back to waiting in line. She tapped my shoulder and reminded me about working together at Burger King. I continued to play dumb, telling her again that I didn't recognize her. I was in too much pain to deal with her drama. She went back to blocking the aisle and pulled out her phone. I could hear her talking to her husband, who was actually a decent guy. She was loudly telling him about seeing me, claiming I was still as stupid as when I supposedly got fired from Burger King. She went on about how I was pretending not to know her, suggesting I was there for bipolar medication and probably couldn't afford it because I was unemployed. She ended the call saying she was going to make me acknowledge who she was. I quickly texted my boyfriend, who was shopping in another part of the store, to come to the pharmacy area. She came back and asked why I was there. When I explained I was just picking up antibiotics because I was sick, she accused me of playing games and insisted I knew who she was. I pleaded with her to leave me alone, explaining that I was tired from spending 5 hours in the ER. She questioned how I could be tired when it was only 10 o'clock. My boyfriend arrived as we were drawing a crowd. When he asked what was wrong, I explained that this woman wouldn't leave me alone and that I didn't know her, adding that even if I did, I wouldn't want to. She tried to get my boyfriend to acknowledge knowing her, but he also pretended not to recognize her. This made her so angry that she stomped her foot and demanded we admit to knowing who she was. When my name was called for my medication, I moved to the counter, but she grabbed me and punched me in the jaw. I stumbled backward, and my boyfriend caught me. The punch landed right where I had an infected nerve in my mouth. My boyfriend helped me to a chair, then confronted her. He demanded to know what her problem was, pointing out that I had made it clear I didn't want to deal with her. He reminded her how she had made my life miserable at work, mentioning that I had been there for 2 years before she showed up and didn't even last 7 months herself. When she called me a lying brat who couldn't hold a job, he pointed out that she was the unemployed one while I had a job. She demanded to know where I worked, but my boyfriend ignored her. Security arrived and took her to their office until the police came. A kind couple offered to pay for my medication after witnessing everything. We stayed to give statements and press charges. Turns out she was there to pick up her own bipolar medication. Her husband showed up as we were leaving and apologized for her behavior mentioning he was actually in the process of filing for divorce. Not only did she get arrested for assault, but she also violated her probation from a previous incident. She's now facing serious jail time, and I finally got the satisfaction of seeing her face real consequences for her actions. This semester, I started working as a student security officer at a private university in the Midwest. Most of my job involves driving students around campus in a golf cart and helping people who lock themselves out of their rooms. It's usually pretty relaxed, except for those occasional shifts that make you question humanity's intelligence. Today was definitely one of those days. It was near the end of my shift when my coworker came in to take over. While grabbing his gear, including a can of pepper spray, standard issue for security, he mentioned there were some kids on bikes causing trouble around campus. Since it's private property, we're required to remove trespassers, especially after having several theft incidents involving teenagers recently. I agreed to help him check it out before ending my shift. We took the golf cart to where the kids were last seen, and honestly, you could hear them from half a block away. They were blasting music and screaming like they owned the place. I already had a feeling this wouldn't be a simple please leave situation, but I had to try. I approached them while staying at a safe distance, about 5 feet away. My coworker remained on the cart about 10 feet behind me, pepper spray ready just in case. I told them they needed to leave since this was private property, warning them that I'd have to call the police if they didn't comply. The first kid just told me to get lost, claiming they were allowed to be there. I responded by asking for their student IDs if they were actually students. That's when the troublemaker kid piped up, saying his mom had given them permission to be there and telling me to get lost. My coworker asked if he should call the cops now, already pulling out his phone before I could answer. One of the other kids yelled something unintelligible, and suddenly the troublemaker kid lunged at me. I raised my hands to protect my face, expecting a punch. I shouted at them to back off, warning them that we had pepper spray. I probably shouldn't have mentioned the pepper spray, but hindsight is 20/20. All 3 kids immediately jumped on their bikes and took off. I shrugged it off and headed back to the office to file the required police report for trespassing. That's when things got interesting. I was barely halfway through the paperwork when my radio crackled to life. I answered with a standard security greeting only to be met with screaming from an angry mother. She was accusing me of pepper spraying her kid. I asked her to repeat herself, thinking I must have misheard. She screamed even louder, calling me names and threatening to call the police. I tried to clarify the situation, mentioning that I had only removed some trespassing teenagers from the premises. The woman continued screaming, insisting that I had pepper sprayed her kid, who was supposedly crying right then. I explained that I hadn't pepper sprayed anyone, and while she was welcome to press charges, filing a false police report would get her into serious trouble. This only made her angrier. She started ranting about how her kids could play wherever they wanted because her taxes supposedly paid for the college. I cut her off by pointing out that her children had been trespassing and that I was currently filing a police report about the incident. I told her she was welcome to involve the police further if she wished, then ended the call. I hung up and immediately got called to my supervisor's office. I grabbed my incomplete report and headed over, thinking I was about to get chewed out. Instead, my supervisor helped me finish the report and congratulated me on handling the situation professionally. Turns out this wasn't Karen's first rodeo. My supervisor pulled up a file showing multiple similar incidents where she'd falsely accused various security officers and university staff of assaulting her kids. This time, though, we had security cameras covering the whole incident. My supervisor decided enough was enough and forwarded all the evidence, including her history of false reports, to the university's legal team. 2 weeks later, I found out Karen had been served with a cease and desist order from the university and was banned from all campus property. Her kids were also permanently banned from the premises. When she tried to fight it, the police decided to charge her with filing false reports based on her history of similar accusations. Some background. 5 years ago, I adopted my cat Pebbles from a humane society when she was just 2 months old. From the moment I held her, we formed an incredible bond. She was my first pet as an adult, and I poured all my love into caring for her. She was always an indoor cat, properly vaccinated and well cared for. Last year, I hit a rough patch and had to move into an apartment that didn't allow pets. I was devastated, but my grandmother offered to take care of Pebbles temporarily. It was the perfect solution. I could visit anytime, and I knew Pebbles would be safe and loved in my grandmother's house. For 11 months, everything was fine. Then my grandmother passed away 3 months ago. It was already hard enough losing her, but what happened next made everything worse. Without even asking me, the actual owner of the cat, my aunt and uncle just took Pebbles to their farm. They have other cats there, but they're all outdoor farm cats. My precious indoor cat was suddenly thrown outside to adapt. When I first visited their farm to check on Pebbles, my heart shattered. She looked terrified and dirty, nothing like her usual self. I tried to express my concerns about her condition, telling them she didn't look good and wasn't used to being outside. My aunt dismissed my worries, insisting that Pebbles would be fine and that all cats love being outside. When I reminded them that she had always been an indoor cat, my uncle just brushed it off, saying cats were meant to be outside and that she would toughen up eventually. I left that day feeling horrible, but at the time, I couldn't do anything about it because of my living situation. Then finally, 2 weeks ago, I found a pet-friendly apartment with a roommate. I immediately called my aunt to tell her I wanted Pebbles back now that I had a pet-friendly place. She flat out refused, using the excuse that her girls had gotten attached to the cat. When I reminded her that Pebbles was my cat, and I had only given her to Grandma temporarily, she just said things had changed, and that Pebbles was part of their family now. I tried reasoning with her, but she wouldn't budge, so I made a decision. Last week, during my lunch break, when I knew everyone would be at work or school, I drove to their farm. It didn't take long to find Pebbles. She was hiding under a tractor, looking miserable. The moment she saw me, she ran straight to me. I scooped her up, put her in my car, and drove home. It took them 2 whole days to notice she was gone. Some attachment, right? When my aunt finally called, she demanded to know if I had taken Pebbles. When I confirmed that I had, she started yelling about how devastated her girls were. I cut her off by stating that Pebbles was my cat, and I had given her to Grandma for a while, not to her. Then I hung up. I immediately took Pebbles to her regular vet, got her checked out, updated all her shots, and had her microchipped in my name. She had lost weight and had fleas, but otherwise was okay. Now my parents are calling me immature for stealing my own cat, claiming my teenage cousins are heartbroken. But how heartbroken could they be when they didn't even notice she was gone for 2 days? They have plenty of other farm cats to play with. Pebbles is now safe in my new apartment, back to being an indoor cat. She's already looking better, eating well, and back to her old self. She spends most of her time curled up on my lap, purring away. My aunt keeps trying to guilt-trip me through other family members, but I'm standing my ground. Some of my relatives are saying I should have handled it differently, but honestly, I'd do it again in a heartbeat. You don't get to steal someone's beloved pet, neglect them, and then claim ownership just because you want to. Pebbles is home now where she belongs, and that's all that matters to me. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.